Hey everyone, it's Christopher Swan, and welcome to this week's episode of Living Your Journey. Each week, I get the amazing opportunity to chat with people that love what they do in life. They understand their passions. Maybe it's a career path or the social impact that they're making. It's kind of like they're following their North Star. Even though their story may change, they understand that they're on their journey every day. This week, we're doing something a little different. I'm looking back at the first 3 months of episodes and highlighting some of the great moments, top advice, behind the scenes extras, and where we're headed next. I'm joined by a special co-host this time, Ryan Dee. He's a fan of the show, faithfully listening to every episode, and he's a terrific friend of mine. Ryan and I talk about our favorite advice from guests, how it can be applied, why it's helpful, and then Ryan helps me dive into the show development, my processes, and more, all stuff you've not heard me talk about before. If you're new to the show, this is a great way to find episodes that you'd like, and for subscribers, this unpacks information you've heard, but in a new way, and you get to take a peek behind the green curtain. Now, get ready for something new, and then after the episodes, I want to hear from you. What are your favorite moments and advice from the show? Okay, here we go. Tell me before we jump in, as you've been thinking about the show and thinking about what, because I've asked you, think about the things that you like about the show or the best moments or best advice. Before we jump in, I'd really love to know even though I know you've been super busy, so I'm sure you've not been thinking about this night and day about my show like I do. But I am curious about, when I did approach you and say, hey, you want to be on the first highlight show and, come in and do something. And what were your thoughts on that? I'm curious, were you excited, a little nervous? Wait, yeah, I can't wait to tell you a few things that I have in my mind, or
D, all of the above. No, totally excited. I think is the primary thing that I felt when you asked, and honored as well. So I appreciate the opportunity to do this. But it's been really exciting to see the show continue to grow and evolve, and the vast variety of guests that you've had so far has been tremendous. I mean, everybody from winery owners to philanthropists to musicians. I mean, it's just running this full gamut. And so it's been fun for me as an audience member listening faithfully every week, to be able to sort of give my perspective is great.
Well, I love that. And I actually really like that you just said something about the, the variety or the, how it spanned from all these different kind of guests. I find that super fascinating, but I wonder at some point, I'm like, do people feel like I'm crazy because I'm not sticking to a formula? There's a lot of shows that really focus on just creative people or just something like a niche, and I feel like I have a niche in a different way, but I find the variety, you can find inspiration everywhere, and that is how I look at the world, and that's why I choose different areas, because you never know where you'll get your inspiration, especially as I'm talking to different walks of life and people around the world, so it's nice to hear that.
Yeah, totally. I mean, and it's funny when you said inspiration is everywhere. I feel like I now need to take a screenshot of the notes that I have in front of me. It literally is the first thing that I wrote down under common themes about the show. It's verbatim, inspiration is everywhere. And so that's what I love so much about the different variety of guests and the different paths that they've taken in the different walks of life. Because truly, I mean, when people think about creativity and being a creative person, they think of artists, they think of musicians, they think of the traditional people that you think of when you think of the word creative. But there is an act of creation in every single thing that we do. And it was one of the things that Alex had brought up, that art is everywhere. When you're in a city, somebody had to think that up. Somebody had to design that. And so, the fact that inspiration is everywhere and creativity is everywhere is what's so fantastic about the guests that you've had on thus far, because it really is an illustration of that very fact.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I love that. Yeah, I love that. We're so synced. You're so in my head then, inspiration is everywhere. That's really how I look at the world. And I remember when I was first explaining what I was going to do with the show, I had this conversation with my mother, and I was explaining, I'm like, I've got this vision, I have this idea, and first she's like, "What are you doing?" And I was explaining it. I was explaining the show, and she's like, "Oh, so who are you going to have on there?" And I mentioned this and this. She goes, "I don't know." She's like, "Will anybody find anything out of that person?" I was like, "You can find inspiration everywhere. Like, it doesn't matter. People are following the things that they love out there, and we all have unique perspectives. And as long as we are great listeners, we can see and feel the passion in which they do and understand maybe there's a nugget there." And, as I started to do more and talk more about that, and I shared ideas, I remember having another conversation with my mother about like, "Oh, and I had this guest idea." And she's like, "Oh, I never even thought about them, and what they were doing." And she's like, "Oh, I can kind of see it more." So I think sometimes it's really just, it's almost getting out of our thinking of, I can, like you said, like, being creative isn't just an artist or a musician or somebody in that field. Gosh, you can be creative anywhere you want. Maybe not accounting. That's probably not the place you should be creative.
I don't know. Spreadsheets can be like color coded. So I think that can also be an act of creation.
Well, that is very true. Very true. So I think it's more about also shifting our thinking. If you can have an open mind to say, gosh, I don't know, something's going to be interesting out of the story, and then you're surprised by the things that you learn. So totally. I think that's the way I look at that. Okay, so like I told you earlier, I was going to kind of jump in. I didn't even do an introduction, so I'm going to back up. I'm going to pause for a minute and say, okay, so I have Ryan Dee on, and Ryan Dee is not just a guest, but he's actually my co-host for this episode. And this is our first of a highlight episode I'm doing for the last 3 months, and I'll jump into that for a minute. But back to Ryan. So Ryan, like he said, he's been listening all along since I've started the show back in early April. He's also been a friend of mine for years. And I thought, just because I know that you have been listening and that you've given me some feedback here and there and just had some really good insight, I thought it would be so exciting for everybody to hear from a real fan, plus somebody who's, engaged and interested, and help us, me and you, explore some of the best, advice and some of the great information in the past that we've been listening to. So let me pause there for a minute. And I want to say, or ask you, Ryan, maybe tell a little bit about, your backstory a little bit, like who you are, what you're doing for work, things that you love, just a little bit about you so that people can understand who my co-host is today.
Totally. Thanks again for having me and for this opportunity. So I am a creative director at an experiential marketing agency. And so really that's just a convoluted fancy way of saying that I get to think up events. So particularly for product launches, grand openings, parties, it's a pretty awesome job that I have. And I get to sit around and think of awesome, wacky things all day. So it's pretty cool. And
tell us a little bit about I love all that, like, I love that you called it wacky, by the way. That's like a word that's not used very often. So that's a good way to sum it up. So, besides just even work too, let me just tell folks, because this is something I've known about you for a long time. You're a very big Disney fan.
Yes.
You love creative, you love pop culture. You're definitely kind of have this sort of, I'm going to say geek, but like in the.
Oh, I'd say that's appropriate.
Okay,
Geek's
I was like,
appropriate.
Like in the cool hip way too. Like you're not probably wearing weird like pocket protectors, but
no.
You have this these interests in you, and I think that also makes sense to share with people so they kind of know where you're coming from. Because I know one of the guests I had, I knew I was super excited to tell you that I had him because I knew you would like him because he's related to the Disney World. So, anyways, I think that's good for people to know. Anything else you would add to that?
Yeah, I mean, like many of your guests that you've had, very varied past. So I wasn't always a person that worked in experiential marketing. I've done things like direct mail. I've done retail. I've done publishing. I'm still a freelance editor on the side for graduate documents, so theses and dissertations. So it's been a very odd path to how I've gotten here, and which is also what's really cool about listening to your podcast is hearing that sort of same thing where they've taken all these different roads and left very lucrative careers, or they've just had this aha moment, these epiphany moments where they're like, yep, you know what? I know that I'm on this path, but this is my passion and I'm going to follow that.
Yeah.
So I feel very much a kindred spirit relationship with a lot of the guests that you've had on because of that very reason.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Absolutely. I think that's why I started the show too as well, was, I had very much the same passion, and, gosh, I had this very maybe colorful background and it didn't always merge, but maybe it did. And let's talk about it. So like I said earlier, this is a highlight show. So if you are a listener that you've been listening in, you've heard all the episodes, we'll recap some of the stuff. Maybe you've only heard some of them. So we'll hit on a few things that you haven't heard. Maybe go back and listen to that episode we just mentioned. Or maybe you're brand new to the show. And with that story, so maybe this is a great way to hear some of the best pieces of advice or best moments or behind the scenes, and it gets you kind of interested to know where to start versus at the beginning. So we're going to walk through some stuff, and this will probably be a little bit shorter episode, but we're going to talk a little bit about what's happened and why we've been doing it. So let me just jump right in with the thing I want us to really kind of chat about is really like the best advice. Because guests in every episode, as you know, I vary my questions sometimes, but I really want to know like why they did it, how they would offer it to others, what have they done, what would they tell themselves if they, their younger self, or, how they would start something, things like that. So it's the best advice for that we've heard throughout the shows. So maybe I'm going to jump it over you and ask you what's some of or one piece of advice that you heard that you thought really resonated for you, and who was it from?
Gosh, again, this probably came from a couple of people, specifically Melanie and Vanessa brought this up during their episodes, but learn about what you don't want to do. And that will inform what you do want to do, but it will also give you tools and skills that you'll eventually end up using for your own life. So with Melanie, she was doing property management, and she was like, yeah, I don't want to do this. But then the skills and the organizational skills that she learned from that, she was able to apply to starting her own business. And same thing with Vanessa when she was talking about that she didn't want to do fashion photography. And so this led her down the path eventually to photographing food. So again, that's probably what resonated with me the most. It's easy for somebody to say, yeah, do what you love, follow your passion. That's great. But that little nugget kind of stuck with me. I was like, yeah, I've actually learned a lot more about myself by what I don't want to do versus following the things that I think I want to do.
Yeah, that's powerful. And I'm curious though too, because when I heard that, and I've actually thought the same thing, I've had to look at that as I didn't know I didn't want to do that until I was doing it. So It was never like this call to like, let me go find the things I don't want to do. It was more of the, as you're starting to do this stuff, you could weed that out and say, yes, those don't fit into that. So I had this amazing conversation with a friend just 2 days ago, and we were talking about, had this vision of where you want to go, like if you have a role you want to go. And I said, sometimes that isn't clear, or you start doing what you think that role is, and you realize that maybe 20% of that thing that you were like super jazzed about, 20% of it you really don't like.
Exactly.
And so some of this is to understand, well, maybe the role itself isn't what you want, but you want stuff around that role. And I think this helps you understand that you don't have to take the full package. You can also take parts of it. You can define things that you really like. There's going to always be things that we don't like to do, but like their advice, I think it's really smart about, it helps shape you. Especially another thought to this is, what if you don't know what you want to do? Like, you're passionate about, you like photography, but do you want to be a photographer? Because truthfully, it's really tough. There's a lot of those people out there. Will you make a living at that? Or maybe there's something related to that. So if you start in that area, you can figure out the parts or the type of photography you want to do, just like Vanessa Stump. So I love that. That's kind of how I looked at it, when when they said some of that stuff too, I was like, yeah. But I don't know that I don't know it until I try it. So
Exactly.
I almost boil it up to like keep trying everything to figure out what you land on.
Yeah, very true. I mean, I actually went to school to study public relations. And all throughout my education, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so passionate about public relations. This is awesome. I love all my coursework. I'm getting awesome grades. I know I'm going to be an excellent person in the public relations field. I graduated. I went to an agency. I hated the work. Like, it was the most mundane, dry thing. And no offense to the public relations professionals out there. But it just wasn't for me. And I found out that what the school was teaching me and what I learned on the job were completely different things.
Yeah.
But yet and still, becoming an excellent writer, being able to pitch stories quickly, all of these things I now use in my daily work as a creative in marketing.
Yeah.
So it wasn't wasted, but it totally showed me that I did not want to do that, but it gave me very valuable skills.
Yeah, I love that you just said that too. Like it wasn't wasted, because Justin Michael Williams, in his episode, he said a couple things. And there's one thing that he also said that your past experiences can help you now, and you need to see them as part of the path to making the passion successful for now. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but, and what he was actually saying in this advice was, because he was really resentful at first of like, why didn't he start this passion of moving into a recording artist career? He had this marketing job that, he started from the scratch and built his own company. He was really successful. And he was like, I don't want to do that. I actually, he had that moment with his grandmother, like literally on her deathbed, that talked about
right.
What do you want to be? And he said, like, don't resent that you started to follow your passion, like, later than you wish you had. Like, maybe you needed to do all those things to actually be really good at what you're at, and he talked about this, he had this marketing background, and now as he's produced his album and he's starting to do this stuff, now he knows how to market lots of stuff because he's already done that. And exactly. I thought that was super powerful. And then another thing he had said, I had asked him about, like, how do you stay kind of inspired on the path? Like, and at that moment, he had already recorded his album. It was packaged, but he had to wait to actually get it out, and it's still not quite out. And I said, so how do you stay on that path? Like, you're close, but you're still like holding on. You still have more work to do. And he says, you need to remember, like what you're heading towards. You're heading towards something big, and you have to stay with that vision. He's like, it's so easy to lose sight of it when you're in the day-to-day. But you need to keep the desire alive. And he said a couple things to do was like either write it down and read it, like really write down what you're seeing and what you're thinking about, or even record it and listen to it. And I just thought, there was this moment of you get lost in the, like, I'm not feeling motivated, or you had a pushback, a challenging client, whatever. But if you have something that reminds you, whatever that thing is, that keeps you connected to what maybe it's not an end goal, but it's the big thing you're looking for. I thought that was powerful. So anyways, a couple things from Justin Michael Williams, because I found him super inspirational, and I love those kind of pieces that he talked about.
Yeah, totally. And another thing that I really took away from Justin's particular episode was the advice to put yourself out of your comfort zone. Like, go someplace, just get away from your usual routine location, and just go be in an area where you are going to feel uncomfortable, where you're going to feel out of sorts, because that's where you really test your mettle. That's how you learn who you are and what you're capable of. And then when you come back to your routine, maybe your routine hasn't changed, but you as this person have changed because of that experience. I thought that was tremendously powerful advice.
And I just heard something new from you. Test your mettle. I've never heard that before. Test your mettle. That's like a Terminator reference or something. Right. I don't know. No, but you're right. Like, to get out of your comfort zone, which we've heard a lot online. just people talking about that. But his reference to it also was so physical for me. It was the literally get out of your space. Like when he moved from Los Angeles to New York, like that was his big thing. Like I couldn't be around the same people doing the same things. Not that it wasn't great to have those friends, but he needed to shake himself up. Chris, it's funny. I just thought about this. Chris Gaida said the same thing about when you're feeling stuck or something, just shake yourself up. And he said, not to get out of your space, but like do something that just big that shakes it up. And his example, which I would never do, which was jump out of a plane. And he was like, oh, it was my second time. I'm totally a different person when I do it. Well, yeah, you almost died. I mean, that's what I thought about it. Because that's not for me. So, but I liked his sentiment of if you shake it up, change your scenery, do something different, it makes you look at the world differently.
Totally.
And that's so smart. I love that.
Yep.
Well, thinking about another piece that really hit home for me, and it's interesting. Let me give almost a little context to why I actually think it's amazing. So I interviewed Tina Zettel, and Tina Zettel was the woman that has the cake business in the wine country. And she said a couple things, but the thing before I even heard those that I thought stood out for me was Tina's a childhood friend of mine. I've known her since, I think I met her when I was 12. So that's quite a long time ago. I know her really well. I've seen her married. I've seen her with, her kids, her grandkids, all these things. So I didn't really think that I was going to hear something new, like advice that was really new. And maybe that was bad me because I had closed mind. And so when listening to her and asking questions, because she and I never really sit around and talk like we do, right? Like podcast talk, how we were at coffee and whatever. Right. So she talked about a couple things, which were thrive on the small successes and the belief from others. Like if you can thrive and remember that, like these small things you're doing, and also that you're hearing people say, gosh, this is amazing, or this cake is wonderful. Like those sorts of things, she's like, that can, help you excel forward, or it compels you to do more, because there's moments where you might get in your own head and you're feeling low, or you're like, am I really doing enough, or whatever. She goes, use that. Don't let that go. And she also said, because there's a moment in her story where there's some really tough moments where she had to shut down the business and restart it. Right. Exactly. And she says, you just have to keep going through the tough stuff. Like keep the faith. And the one last piece, I'm sorry, there's a third piece here that I remember now, because when she talked about that, because this is a thing that really resonated with me, especially at that time. She's like, I really wish people told me the reality of what hard really meant, And when she said that, she started to explain that, it's going to be hard, but it's more than you think it is. It's like, that's a generic phrase. Of course I'm going to work long hours, but the hard is going to be unexpected things, and don't get like ruffled by that. Exactly. It's keep the faith, and it will happen. So yeah. So anyways, it's super exciting for me to hear those things from somebody I thought I knew so well, but still surprised me with things that I could incorporate in my life today. So I think that's a lesson to everybody. Like, the people around you that you probably know really well, probably have great advice. You might want to listen differently, deeply, ask a new question.
Yeah, totally. And that was the exact same thing that really resonated with me so much with Tina's episode, was that she didn't start her business once. She started it twice. And, when you ask other entrepreneurs, like, would they have done it again? And maybe some of them say yes, some of them say no, but she actually had to. Like, she did it and overcame this incredible, personal obstacle in her life and did it again. So, I mean, talk about a testament to stick-to-itiveness and determination. So, yeah, major hats off.
Is there any advice that you've heard, Ryan, too, that you, because, we're talking about these great pieces that we really like, but is there anything that you've actually heard that maybe you've tried to apply, or stuff that you've actually seen in real life?
So it comes back to that putting yourself out of your comfort zone. So, opportunities and ideas come across my desk all the time. And maybe my first inclination is don't do that. Well, now because of having this sort of incorporated into my psyche, I'm like, you know what? I'm actually going to go and do that and see what happens, and maybe I'm going to enjoy it, and maybe I'm not, but I'll be all the better for it from having gone through the experience. So overcoming fear, and that's sort of, and I don't know if you've picked up on this in listening back to the episodes thus far, but overcoming fear is a very common theme throughout all of the episodes.
Yeah.
And it's different sorts of fear. It's fear of not knowing, fear of rejection, fear of just creating something, even fear of success, fear of trying, fear of, what is bad out there, and facing up to those fears and overcoming them. So that I feel bolder from listening to everybody's stories. And so that's how I've applied what has been shared so far into my own life is to, if there's something that I think would make me uncomfortable, there's something that I'm fearful of because I don't know about it. Now I feel more passionate about going after those things because you never know what could happen.
You're right. I love that. And fear is, I think, it's a theme for anybody that really tries to do their own thing. If you go online and just search articles on LinkedIn or any around that space around startups, entrepreneur, you'll find a lot of that theme. It's Jerrod Maruyama said something very much about that too. He talked about you can't wait for the perfect time or the perfect to start your thing.
Right.
It's always going to be scary. So if you're waiting for the perfect thing, don't. You got to find when that time is for you. But the big thing he also said was you just got to work at it. Don't talk about it. Don't just say you're going to do something. Really do it no matter what it is. And just to flash back to that was also the guest I was referring to that I referenced earlier that I thought Ryan would be super excited about.
And I was completely. When you gave me the preview, it was everything that I could do to not say it out to the world and oh my God, you'll never guess who he's going to have on the show next. My office is literally wallpapered with hipster Mickey. So that was incredible. And, one of the things that he brought up that really resonated with me and something that I had, or something that I was curious about, and so glad that you asked it was, now that you've done hipster Mickey and people know you for this work, how has that changed you as an artist? And him saying that, yes, it's brought me notoriety. Yes, it's brought me a lot of opportunities. But I've always wondered, with a successful artist, you think Andy Warhol, you think soup cans and Marilyn Monroe. But does an artist then get sort of typecast and pigeonholed into, okay, everything that you do from this point on had better look like hipster Mickey? And
Right.
So the fact that he addressed that and setting that expectation with his clients was really fantastic. How he's responding to that he is using this as a platform to explore different opportunities and to still express himself uniquely through his work. But yeah, I was so glad when you asked that question because I wondered the exact same thing. Because I love all of his stuff. I mean, I have a lot of the hipster Mickey, but I have some of his more Japanese Chiba style designs with Star Wars and things like that. But I was totally curious about that. So glad that you asked it.
Yeah, I felt the same way. Obviously, I asked the question, but I was also thinking about, because I looked at all his stuff and, he makes references about himself, about making adorable characters. And if you look at all of his stuff, a lot of it really is that adorable look, even though they can be different, a little bit different style. And it is interesting to see how he works a little differently. And if you look at his past clients, he actually has worked for a ton of the large organizations out there. So, his reference and influences a lot of places. I think I've noticed as well, after a while I do the show and I think, I want to do something a little different. Or you'll notice my questions will change or I'm testing out new things at the end. And, it's the same thing. That's how I thought about it because I kind of personalized and thought, well, I want to do different things. And, also this is the first of shows that we want to create. And so there's more shows I want to try. And I want to do it in different styles. Maybe not so talky and deep and, soul searching. And maybe it's a little bit more just silly and fun. So I looked at that for him and thought, gosh, maybe you want to try to do different things or you get bored or whatever. So yeah, I thought that was powerful. I'm curious, we could keep talking, and I'm sure you probably have a laundry list of great best advice as well. But I'd also love for us to really I'm just thinking about some of the best moments. I'd love for us to maybe highlight just some of those like great moments that maybe stood out for you. And, maybe we'll sprinkle in a little behind the scenes stuff as we keep having that conversation. So, maybe let me ask this before we jump over there. Any other advice that you're like, oh, I gotta tell everybody to like go check this out before we move on?
I guess that another common theme that I've seen throughout the episodes is that we're all still figuring it out. I mean, all of your guests are still figuring it out, and you put this in your intro before every episode that they're still in their journey, and if things changed, it's okay because they know that they're still following what they need to do. So much of when we're growing up, it's pick a profession, that's your life, it's the end, black and white. But it's so much more fluid than that, and to see that play out throughout the episodes is really fantastic.
You're right about the fluidity of it. I think that's the society trap that we get into, especially Western culture, is that pick a profession. And once you get older, you realize you don't always have to do that.
Right.
And that can happen for many reasons. Industry changes, whatever happens, but you can reinvent yourself. I think Anna Harris said something about she has this opportunities that she's opportunistic journey of trying new things. She's like, you can do anything, but you also want to be a little reasonable, because if you're like, she said something like, if you're 76 and you want to be an astronaut, that may not happen for you.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that you can't be in that world. You could be part of the administration, part of the whatever, but maybe you're not going to go to space. So, I thought that just helped me think about, well, maybe there are boundaries here and there, but, about being realistic, but, evolve. That's how I reflect on myself. I've been in a couple different careers, and I love the adventure. You just evolve with it. So, yeah, great point to that. Going back to Jerrod, I was just thinking about, when I was thinking about a really great moment, I just thought I would share too, just because we were on that theme where you like really excited that, he was going to be a guest. I have to say one of my best moments during all the shows really was when Jerrod said yes to me, because it was somebody who I really admired, and I liked his work. Obviously, I discovered his work when I was in Disney World a while ago, and it was so like I even told him when I was on the phone with him that I'm like, pretty much every morning I drink coffee out of like hipster Mickey mugs, and I was like, and I have like 3 pieces of your artwork in my office, and I look at it all the time. And I had just received something for my birthday from his work, and I said, yep. I was like, so it's when I was able to reach out to somebody like that I really admire, and he was like, yeah, of course, and he was so humble, and I was a bit surprised, but and I think that the cooler part of this is he was so lovely, and it was actually so much fun, like having a conversation with him, because even after we ended the official podcast, I think he and I remained on for another like hour, maybe,
wow,
just catching up and talking about the reality of life. And, we talked about where he lived more, about where I lived. And just, so to me, I was like, gosh, I felt like I earned a friend out of this. So
right.
Talk about a great moment out of recording an episode or just out of the show.
Yeah, that's so cool. But now that you've revealed that there was another hour or so of footage, I'm expecting a release of Jerrod Maruyama uncut. So I'm just putting that out there in the universe.
Yeah, that's probably not going to happen. I was just going to say, because that was, okay, Ryan, there are some that I do that with, and I actually have some special recordings that I may have of others. But there are some that we're very candid about some things and we don't record. So, not that Jerrod said anything weird or wrong or whatever, but, we got a lot more personal about some more things. Because I was like, okay, we're not recording. Let me ask you some real stuff. So we'll see. Well, maybe right. There'll be a revisit down the road. Maybe Jerrod has friends in my town, so we did agree that when he comes to visit some friends, we're going to arrange some time to have dinner or something and hang out. So maybe we'll do a little extra bonus episode or something, and you can send in a question.
That would be fantastic.
So as you've listened from, especially from your end, from, from a listener perspective, as you've heard some of this, what are the kind of cool moments or interesting moments that have popped out for you that maybe was like fun, surprise, whatever?
Gosh, I just, the passion that comes across from each of your guests is so infectious. And after I get done listening to it, I feel like, it's like when you watch a really good movie and you feel like you can go out and take on the world. That's how it kind of feel like when I get done listening to one of your episodes.
Oh, that's a great feeling.
Because it's so passionate and inspiring. And so that's what's been the most fun for me, and what keeps me coming back is that the guests are truly, genuinely passionate about what they're doing. So that's what stands out the most.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like, I feel super, super lucky to talk to all these folks because they're the ones creating the passion. I mean, they're the ones that are making the show, really. Without them, we wouldn't have one. And I'm just so like, I'm not surprised by how amazing people are and things that they do and the passions that they have. I just feel in awe a little time of hearing just the magic. It's almost like the magic behind the scenes, and I think those are some really interesting moments. One thing that, I don't know, I was experimenting with something when I made Tina Zettel up here on the show. I say made because not the recording part, but at the moment too, I was like, oh, I have this new photo equipment. And we're going to do a mini photo shoot, which she really doesn't like. And I was like, so I bought all these, I have all these studio lights and all of this stuff, reflectors. And so we're going to do some mini shoot. I mean, she also brought over a cake, so you cannot complain about that.
Well, exactly.
Which she made especially for the episode. So that was pretty cool. But I also was like, oh, and so we're going to do this whole photo shoot thing. And she was like, really? We're really? I'm going, uh-huh. So I had to tell you, kind of behind the scenes, there's a few photos that, you can see online. There's a few more I still have. But I think that was a really funny moment because I don't do that with everybody. And I knew I could push the button with her a little bit more because I had the angle.
Right.
So that was a fun thing that, I think in the future we're going to do a little bit more behind the scenes stuff as well with that photo equipment, for the people that are in person as well.
Totally. And that's actually, you bring up something interesting, and this isn't on the podcast, but the fact that you have the site that partners with the podcast so that when you have the behind the scenes, either footage or additional information, or when you link the song that Justin put out, that really rounds out the experience. And so giving all that bonus feature, if you will, information is really something that I enjoy about the series too.
That's good to hear that. I haven't heard a lot of the feedback out of that stuff. I think it's interesting, especially Justin's song or the trip that Vanessa took and end up touching the whale. And because when we were on the podcast and she told me that, and I was like, wait, you what? She's like, yeah, it swam right up to us. And I was like, that's crazy talk. And I was like, can you send me the picture? She goes, of course. And I just thought, wow, that was super cool to see how real that was. Because when I looked at the photo, I was like, this totally looks like animatronic Disney stuff. Because I just couldn't wrap my head around a whale swam up. It just seems so movie-esque. So it's true. Well, here's something that people don't know yet, and this happens actually. So by the time this is airing, it will has already happened. But starting this week, actually, we're putting out new original content separate from the podcast. So original articles that will go out once a week.
Nice.
That will be related to topics and content and subjects of the episodes, and sometimes even curate pieces out of the episodes. But it will be all original stuff about, following your journey, passions, advice, even some entertainment spins. So not only will we continue the bonus content when we have it, but also, weekly we'll have new articles. So you can have multiple reasons now to participate, to find inspiration or tangible advice.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
And I think it's when I put in the review for the podcast that really, what I've come to see this series as is it's sort of life hacks for creatives. And again, creative doesn't necessarily mean somebody that's in a traditional creative field, but it is applicable to your life. It doesn't matter what you do. And it's just really fantastic life experience information to hear. It's great.
Yeah, I agree. I like that you call it life hacks because that's kind of how I think about it. It is like how do you just like, you can find inspiration, but my goal is always that it's tangible too. Like you can find some stuff that feels really great, but the thing about inspiration is, or some motivational talk is great. You turn the episode off, but then what? Like, are you actually going to do it? Like, it's the people that read all the inspirational quotes all the time, which I actually really love half of them, but and then I change the channel. It's
right, exactly.
It's how do you actually make that work? So I always think of, if something can be actionable, I can at least take one thing away and try it out and see how it fits for me and maybe move my journey further.
Yeah. I mean, and listening to the episodes, like, in Chris's episode, he talked about how success isn't always about money and the stuff that you have.
Yeah.
It's about your personal growth as an individual, the relationships that you forge throughout your life, the experiences that you've been able to have. Those are marks of success, not the car that you drive, the house that you have, these material things that we tend to associate with success. That the real riches in a person's life are the things that they've done and the people that they've met and the person that they've become. So again, something that, you hear these words and it really changes your perception of your own reality and your own journey. So it's been tremendously helpful to me as a listener. So it's just really great information.
You know what? I actually, it's interesting you talk about that thing with, like Chris's point, because I think about purpose is different for everybody, and we all have a different purpose to serve, whatever that might be. And it doesn't have to be like you're going to solve world hunger. It could be whatever, as long as it's meaningful for you. And I think our purpose evolves. That I've always been really kind of true to that idea that your purpose evolves when you're 20 and when you're 45, when you're 65, that maybe it's all similar, but it evolves and they're maybe a different angle or whatever. And so sometimes success merges in with your purpose, have you successfully worked towards your purpose? And I think sometimes, I don't want to say it's about youth, but sometimes we do have success markers can be financial, because maybe it's about a house, and because the house equals a place I can raise the family, or I can have my kids or whatever. So, and later it may be about giving back in a different way, like Danica O'Leary and the Haircuts for the Homeless. So it's interesting. I think when I listen to that kind of stuff, I just, I hope people can hear that, everybody's purpose or success markers are going to be different. But you may hear advice or look at things differently to help you evolve your purpose as you go. That's actually one of the articles that we're working on as well, is about the evolution of purpose. Because I think that, sometimes we get lost in that. That's also where we get, like, when that changes, we sometimes struggle with how does my career match the new purpose or the evolution of that, because it might not now. So what do I do now? So anyway, something kind of interesting. Hey, let me just, just because I was to say we're running out of time a little bit too, but I'd love to. I'm going to throw this over to you, and because I've been peppering you with all these questions. I think probably because that's what I'm used to as the host of the show. So let me do this. Let me throw it over to you, because I think this is a great time to even maybe just give a couple little snippets for the folks that have been listening along, just some of those kind of even deeper behind the scenes stuff. Maybe even we could talk about maybe some feedback, or maybe the challenges and the surprises or best things I've had about the show. So maybe I'll throw it over to you, and maybe you can pepper me.
Yeah, so having created this, what's that creation process been like for you, to have this idea, the seed of an idea, and to launch the first episode and keep the series going? What's that process been like for you?
It has been ever changing, ever evolving. Really, it's been, because it's hard to describe. I can't say, oh, it's been amazing. It has been amazing. It's also been really difficult, and it's been. I feel like I've learned lessons the entire time, and it's been eye-opening. This is my journey, so that's part of what I'm doing. So I had to tell you, like, starting from the seed of like where I had my little aha moment to the I'm going to do this thing. Oh, I've never created a podcast and I know nothing about audio equipment, but I'll figure that out. It's to the how do you edit this stuff to, so it's been so interesting. So like as an overview, it's been super enjoyable. I will also say that, I've had these really great, like some of the best things about starting the show is like how much I've learned from interviewing these folks. I knew I was going to learn some stuff, but I didn't actually have that in my mind. Like I was on the learning journey. It was more of, I wanted to help tell people stories to help others be inspired. And sounds so ridiculous, but I was like, I'm so inspired by these people. And I've learned so much. I'm like, well, duh, of course, I'm around these wonderful people. And that's such a gift to have that, and to look at life a little different way because they're all really different people. Mm-hmm. I can also say, something that I have found as a nugget to this of, I didn't realize it would come out this way. So I need to schedule guests all the time. And that's a regular occurrence of my week. And, I can start easily with people I know, which is what I did. Do what you know. That's what I've always kind of learned, which I picked up from my mentor, Heather Rim, many, many years ago, who told me, do what you know first. Like you can get started that way. And as I started to branch out thinking, oh, who are the people I admire? Like the, Jerrod and others. I started to realize that having a show like this also was this gift of, I can talk to anyone now. Like, I feel like I have a valid reason to contact people outside of my network, like especially people I admire. And not like I couldn't have done that before. We all have social media. I could go on Twitter and reach out to anybody. But like, was I going to reach out to Jerrod and be like, hey, I'm some schmo that likes your work. Want to talk? Like.
Right.
Maybe he would have been like, sure, you sound interesting. But it gives me that angle of, I have a show and I really want to talk about your story, but also the like super cool, like geeky, fanboy in me. It's like, I really just want to talk to you. Like, will you be my friend? So it's so ridiculous. But it's giving me a little bit of freedom, which makes me feel a little bit more courageous. So I think that's one of the cool things. I'll pause there. There's multiple other things, but yeah, that's like some of like the cool, interesting things about starting the show.
Nice. So what has been the biggest challenge? Aside from getting started, the things that you've learned, what has been the most difficult thing about running this series?
Most difficult thing, interesting, because they're probably in different gamuts, about like the challenges. So when you start anything, this is really great advice for anybody. When you start anything, there are going to be a lot of things you don't know that are coming your way, and you don't even know to expect those. There's a lot of things you can learn. Like I learned about, when I first started, I was like, okay, well, how do I record this? What are the best advices? Do I need, I heard advice from everybody, and do I need, what kind of mic? And what if I want multiple guests on the show? You need different types of equipment from multiple guests? I did not know that. Oh, recording your computer versus a audio device. Sorry. Okay. I can manage all that because I can read a lot. So when I first launched, though, there were a lot of problems behind the scenes where like things were just wrong, and some of it was with vendors that was out of my control, and, things were not done correctly. And then there were things I just didn't know to do. And so like the first couple weeks was what I don't think anybody knew was like, it was a full on, in my head, disaster. I was like, oh my gosh, the episode's not coming out the right way. It's this thing's wrong, whatever. And I think I checked with a couple of people. I don't think anybody actually realized at all that I had any problems in the background. But, it was this holy crow, so many things were going wrong, and I was working till like 2, 4 in the morning every night, just like to fix a couple things and get things right, and so that was a big challenge for me. And I didn't lose faith. It was just I had no clue those things could go wrong. So I think that was a thing. Like here's a good example of that. One of my mics was bad, And I didn't know that until after a couple of recordings. And a couple of those recordings were of guests that were in person. And it sounded like this. So I couldn't, like, what? I couldn't, like, you need good audio. That's what the show is. So, I had to replace the mic. And these things aren't cheap either when you buy really good stuff. And could I reschedule these people? What do I feel like about rescheduling? Am I going to sound like some fool that doesn't know what he's doing? So, there's things like that behind the scenes you don't know. You just kind of learn and move on and also just face it. So I think, those are probably the things that are probably the biggest challenge, I think. The one last thing I would probably say is also, I only share this, not that it's a huge challenge, but it's something good to know, is balancing a schedule. So, like for me, it's when do I record? How many do I record? I've had a schedule. When do I need to reschedule? When guests reschedule on me multiple times? Or, if you have a day job, how do you balance the day job with the current job? And, those sorts of things. And I think, it's a nuance that it takes time to understand how to do it all and to make it work for you. So, I would say just a little advice back to others is don't beat yourself up when you're starting to do something and you feel maxed. You'll find your balance. Just keep, like Tina Zettel says, keep the faith, keep going.
Mm-hmm. Totally. And so, and Tina being one of your childhood friends and still a friend, one of the things that has come up, and even I said it, I think, in my review comment in the iTunes, but a lot of other people have said it as well, that when listening to your podcast, it sounds like a conversation between two friends that have known each other for a very long time. Obviously, that's not the case with guests like Jerrod, but it still has that same friendly tone. So I know you must do a ton of preparation in getting ready to do the episodes that you do, but how do you keep it friendly, conversational, and not have it come out canned because you've done all that prep?
Oh, that's interesting. I was going to say it's a good question. It's so funny. People always say that about a question. That's a good question, Ryan. But it's a smart question because I think the canned element can happen in two different ways. It is the research piece, but there's another piece to it, which I have been aware of. If you do it long enough and enough times, you start to realize that it becomes a formula. And I even was following a little bit of a formula. And you'll hear this if you listen to all the episodes through, that I change styles with some things. And I ask certain questions and I don't ask them again. Or I've asked the same one multiple times. And so I think part of the magic there is to remember that everybody has an individual story. So what I try to do is keep a little consistency of is there advice this person can offer? It doesn't always have to be from the same question, but it could be something that's tangible. And when I do so much research, it's true, I do a lot of research on people, and this was a learning curve as well. When I first started with this, it was I knew everything about them, and I was almost walking through that life of theirs, and I started to realize, like, I got bored, so I started to just write down things that I thought were really interesting that I wanted to hit on. And I'm very conversational, and I think that resonates with a lot more people. It feels personal, and truly, for me to be interested, I want it to be a conversation. I also want to be a little surprised on the interview. So I do a lot of research, but some things I actually will not dive too deep in now. Like I'll know the tip of the iceberg. I may not know how, which way it went, or how wide it is. So I make a little bit of a balance of learn a lot, try not to learn every single detail, and be a little surprised. I got advice the very first day I released my first episode from a friend that said, when you're surprised, we're surprised with you. And they like that. So I thought, there's some magic to that as well. So I don't ever want to not know something about somebody, but I do want to try to keep it fresh. And so, so there's a lot of balance there. So I'm sorry, that was a roundabout, but, I try to really look at the nuance of who these people are, and where they live, because they all don't live online. Not every guest I have has a Twitter account or even like social media very much. So, like I can't always learn so much about them. I have to like feel like I need to get private investigator on them.
Right on.
Yeah.
So what's next? What, you've got your first 12, 14 episodes out there in the universe. Where do you want to see your show go from here?
There's definitely going to be a lot of the continue of the same. So, more telling stories, more people, different industries, a lot of that stuff. But it's been important for me to really listen to feedback as well. I've been doing that all along, and I love feedback. I mean, I love the positive feedback more than critical because that just feels really good and strokes my ego. But but obviously critical is lovely as well because I can grow. And not only as a host, which is important, but it's really about like what's going to make the show resonate more or helpful. And so by listening some of that, like going forward, I want to be able to evolve the show a little bit. So that means, maybe a more variety. I'd really love to focus also on more social impact stories, people doing good in the world. That's part of their purpose and how they're making that happen. And I think there might be some opportunities to do like more highlight shows. Maybe there's a recaps, like every 3 months we do it. So we do it a few times a year. And I also think that, we might start to change. Maybe there's a different way to add even stories we're not thinking about now. So we focus a lot on career, and there can be some social impact piece. But maybe it's about a snippet in time story as well. So maybe there's just like a smaller episode that's like maybe talk about just one part of that journey, maybe a big project or a big aha moment that somebody had versus their entire story. That might be something interesting where it's also bite-sized content. So those are some of the ideas I'm thinking about.
Nice.
Again, the feedback piece is what's super helpful when, people can talk about like, hey, ask some of these questions, or, don't go through that part of the journey. Like it's like somebody said to me at one time, sounds like a job interview. And I was like, oh, duly noted. Don't ask those questions. So, right. I laugh at that. It probably didn't sound so great to me when I heard it at the moment. But, so anyways, I think that's what I'm looking for in the show to go next. What about you? Let me ask you that question. What would you as a listener, like, if you've heard this advice, do you want more advice? Do you want more stories? Do you want anything different?
I don't know. I think that the variety, as long as you keep up with that, I think that's what excites me the most. When, you've got a filmmaker this week, and then the next week you have a photographer, and then the next week you've got somebody that's doing corporate communications. And so you just never know, who you're going to have on next. And so the variety is what I love. And so, but I think that it's definitely something that you're going to keep doing anyway. So the variety is what's key for me.
Let me put a plug out there too. I would just say too, I'd say it to you, and I say it to anybody that, I'm pretty good at scouting people that I admire and people that are doing great things in the world too. But hey, you guys are listeners to this. If there are people that you think are, they're kind of following their journey, they're really living the things that they love. If it's, that like I said, a small project, or if it's their life, social impact, career, whatever, send them in. If there's something that you want, you think that really fits this kind of story, I'd say, share it, because, I'm one person living in, tons of people around the world, and I can only see so many. So I definitely want to keep the variety, industry, age, career levels, all those things. So absolutely, I'd say, so your call to action is send me some stuff. Send me names.
There's actually somebody that I have in mind. He actually is also from Santa Rosa. He's a sort of a Periscope up-and-comer YouTuber, sort of a guy, and he's done a web series in the past, and I think he'd be fascinating to have as a guest. And there's a couple other people that I can think of as well. But I'd be more than happy to do that. And I think that the listeners out there would be more than happy to do that as well.
Good. Well, send us an email, send it online. Can I put you on the spot and ask you for the person's name now so we can just make it public?
Sure. His name is Matt Cullen.
Matt Cullen.
Mm-hmm.
I was also really curious if I knew him. That was actually part of it. I'm like, wait, how odd would that be?
Right.
Especially since I was like, I don't know if I know they're doing a web series or has done one.
Mm-hmm.
Well, good. Well, it's funny because I said this episode is going to be shorter. So, we're almost like in an hour. This is so not short. So, for everybody that's been listening along, I hope everybody has stuck with us, really heard some, tidbits or some really great nuggets, and or maybe helped you think about going to listen to an episode that you didn't hear before, or a way to apply the stuff that we've talked about. And I would say to everybody that's also listening, like what just Ryan, did a great honor of having some fun conversation about just the things that we've liked. The question's out to you. Here's another call to action. So, what were your favorite moments or best advice or anything that you've learned from this that you've started to use? I've heard some personal feedback, some from, folks that talked like Tina's episode really resonated with them, or Danica O'Leary's, but anybody else have something to share, or maybe someone we should go revisit? We'd love to hear it. So send us an email on accidentalinformation.com. Send us a Facebook message or Twitter, whatever. We're out there. And as we're wrapping up, Brian, any last thoughts for you before we wrap up and say on to the next quarter of episodes?
Yeah, looking forward to hearing the upcoming episodes, including the one that just released today. I haven't gotten to listen to it yet, but definitely is on my podcast list, and just looking forward to seeing the show continue to evolve and grow, and more people learning about it. I preach it out to all of my social media followers, so I love it and can't wait to see and hear more.
I love that. I would say, and for you, Ryan, and for anybody else, please tell them anywhere social, tell them in person. Not everybody's listening to podcasts yet, but it's a great way to spread the word. So if you love the show, it would really help us if you've also spread the word. So Ryan, thank you for being on. This is, it was like a learning curve for both of us, because
thank you for having me.
You haven't done this before and I haven't done a highlight. So I think it's a lot of fun. So this is awesome. So thanks for being on the show. I know that we will talk soon.
Sounds good. Thanks, Christopher.
Now over to you. Any thoughts or questions you'd like to share? Seriously, do you have any questions you'd like to ask me or the guest? We'll answer them and even get the guest to help us. So send us a message, use our Facebook page and email us there, or post a comment or question on the page, or tweet us at accidentalinfo using hashtag #livingyourjourney. You can find out more about all the guests, links to their sites and social channels, and even bonus content all at accidentalinformation.com. Now, a couple favors. Go subscribe to the show and you'll be the first to get the download before everyone else. Also, take just a couple moments and head over to the show in iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts and give us a quick review. Quick, easy, and I would love it. This totally supports us and it helps me bring in interesting guests each week and keeps the show going. Also, I love to read them and see what you guys are really thinking. Thanks for joining the conversation, and remember, Living Your Journey is available every Tuesday. Until next week.